The season 5 of the Humans and AI podcast is here. We're going to be chatting with incredible founders and leaders across the neocloud, AI infrastructure and platform space with a sharper focus on today. We're going to be learning about their businesses, the roles they're in, the challenges they face, what's actually working and what's not. This is current, unfiltered insight from the people building AI. I really can't wait for you to hear it.
James, thank you very much for coming here today. Obviously, you and I have been talking a little bit about it now, and obviously Tam introduced us not so long ago. So really, for the benefit of viewers and listeners, do you mind just doing a little bit of an introduction as to who you are, previous role, obviously going for a bit of transition at the moment, and then we'll just talk a little bit more about the business, and then we'll go back into some of the history as well, if that's all right.
Sounds good. Well, great to be here. And James Griffin, I am the former CEO of Cyber Sentriq, current board advisor. And how did I get here? Let's talk about Cyber Sentriq first. So actually about a year ago, last June, we announced that we created this company called Cyber Sentriq from the merger of Redstor, the company I'm the CEO of, and TitanHQ over in Galway. Brought them together to create this new cybersecurity business focused on MSPs in the UK, the US, and Europe. Really fantastic business to have led.
Fantastic. So obviously you're working there. We're going to talk a lot more about that, but we'll just go back into a little bit more about who you are, if that's all right. So obviously you've been within the IT managed service for quite some time, as we talked about the other day, as have I. I suppose just good to understand how it all started, how you got really into sort of tech space.
Yeah, well, actually, when I was 16 was my first tech role, believe it or not. And I started my career as a Mac technician when they were not plastic, when they were tin boxes used by design agencies. And that was my first real step into the tech and never left it. So I guess between sort of then and now, I really saw the whole .com wave. That was fantastic. So that got me into the web hosting space at quite a young age, where I was privileged enough to run sort of pretty much every part of a growing web hosting company, apart from finance. And I sort of stayed within that space for a little while. That led me to manage hosting, building data centers, seeing how infrastructure runs, into telcos and into software, actually building software for accountants, and really sort of spending time in strategy, product, marketing after, I guess, the early days of my career were spent more on the sales side of things. So actually picking up phones and trying to sell things to people. But I found my way to product because I love the technology. But, and this may not sound great, but actually what I've always enjoyed is seeing how money can be made out of technology, that sort of commercial drive. And really I think that's then placed me into product roles where your job is to turn technology into a revenue stream for the business. And I really enjoyed that because it allows me to rove across all the different departments that operate inside the organization. And it's been a fun career, and obviously ultimately led me to being the CEO of a private equity-backed software company operating in the cybersecurity space. So, really a 30-year journey.
30-year journey within products, like I say, working across different, I suppose, industries within tech, so whether it be software, whether it be cloud hosting, and now obviously security. So, I've known Redstor for quite a number of years. Obviously, saw the change last year with the merger. So, obviously, what brought that about then as two complementing businesses?
Yeah, I mean that's really the key, actually, to complementary businesses. So running a backup organization, what I could see and what we could all see was that there was a huge amount of consolidation in the channel, particularly in the MSP space, where MSPs really wanted platforms that gave them the core elements of a service to help protect the business. So we felt that we needed to move towards cyber, and realistically, the only way you can do that is through a partnership or through a transaction. And what led us to the Titan transaction, I think actually culturally, very similar businesses. They're based out of Galway. They serve the MSP space. Really enjoyed meeting the team there before we did the transaction. Really great little business that has managed to crack the US and had a brilliantly solid reputation. So we felt that sort of putting backup email security together in a single platform made a lot of sense for not only both businesses, but for all of our MSPs. And we have about 3,000 MSPs now as part of the consolidated business.
I mean, that's a huge customer portfolio. Now, obviously, this is the Humans in AI podcast. Obviously, you're very much within cybersecurity. Obviously, AI is becoming a huge part of that now, and particularly, not just internally, but obviously externally as well. And I think people always talk about the AI side of things as the good and the benefit, but not necessarily about the risks and the threats to it. And obviously, when it comes to security, that's a huge challenge for end customers and MSPs as well. So how's that really sort of impacting the security space now as we know it?
Oh, it's a massive impact at the moment. And I think the biggest challenge for anybody operating in this space, particularly the MSPs, is keeping pace with it. Because you've got different vectors. So you, of course, have got the bad guys using AI to find more efficient and intelligent ways to attack people. And that's only going in one direction. And there are vendors out there building new solutions to try and arm those MSPs to keep ahead of it. And that is just a ridiculously fast-paced game right now. And if you're a vendor in this space, you have to stay ahead of that. That is the new rule of the game. But for me, there's the other piece that's probably a little bit less talked about, which is humans using AI in businesses, and that is creating a really interesting sort of threat and challenge for MSPs. And it comes down to this, if an MSP is managing IT for a customer, and that customer does something with AI that disrupts the network or almost hacks themselves, who's paying the bill? Is it the MSP? And I think this is a challenge we see now, and I do dub it as security, because ultimately there are humans deploying AI within businesses for good, but are actually creating bad situations for themselves. There's numerous articles out there of things as simple as letting agents roam on your network and it deleting your backups.
Yeah.
That's what hackers do. So, that's creating an educational challenge for MSPs. It's creating a tooling challenge. I think there's a noise and attention challenge as well. Just coming back from RSA, there are just thousands and thousands of vendors trying to tell MSPs, we're your new best friend, we're going to solve this challenge. And there's just a huge wall of noise hitting the channel at the moment, and MSPs having to navigate their way through this and find the right tooling for them and their particular customer base. I think that's one of the biggest challenges I see right now.
I was going to say, because it's there's products, they can churn out products as much as, but because you are dealing with just ultimately humans in companies, I'm not particularly tech savvy as a perfect example, and I'm probably your worst nightmare. Is this largely more about adoption and education and training as opposed to necessarily the tech stack, or is it a combination of both?
I think it's a huge combination of both. So choosing the right tech, knowing how to use it, training people, but also governance and putting the right structure in place. And I do think, and we've seen it ourselves as a software company operating in the space and adopting AI ourselves, there is a huge tension between governance and the desire to go very, very fast. That's a constant push and pull, and that's constantly moving. And I think somewhere in there between process, procedures, training, and picking the right tools is the answer. I'll be slightly controversial now. I'm kind of fed up of reading LinkedIn and hearing all the experts, because there aren't any experts. Everybody is learning right now at a huge pace, and I don't think anybody actually has the answer to this. And I think those that say they do will fall behind because they don't.
And so that's a good point. So with the complexities of the challenges that companies are facing now, externally and internally with AI, when looking at potentially a security partner, what should they actually be considering when going through that sort of vendor selection process? Because, like I say, no one has the real answer. And if they do, they're probably lying and just sort of winging it. What should they be really looking out for?
Yeah, well, I think what a lot of the MSPs that we work with do very, very well is they use frameworks to protect their customers. And actually, a lot of the major frameworks out there, particularly in the UK, do have very clear guidance on where your major threat vectors are for your customers. And obviously, MSPs typically serve the small and medium-sized businesses. So things like Cyber Essentials Plus, that's all about having the basics done very, very well. And AI doesn't change that. So if you haven't got the basics taken care of, and as an end customer, you're not working with an MSP that's looking after the basics, that you need to address those first before you start to concern yourselves with the threats of the future. Because those baselines are there for a very, very good reason. And they should be addressed first. And then, in terms of MSPs, I think that the vendor selection that they go through isn't just product quality. Of course, I certainly think if you're playing in this space, which is highly competitive, having a product that solves the problem is a table stake. Today, it needs to continue to solve future threats. But actually, there's a whole other bunch around it, that it's really important to MSPs. So how does it interact with the rest of the tooling that they use? How is that vendor supporting them when there's a problem? What are the commercials? MSPs need to make money. They need to make margin. So it's a relatively long scorecard, and of course that starts with how the MSP is packaging and selling this to their customers. And certainly the model I see that's working really well out there for MSPs is those who are setting a sort of a minimum benchmark now. So they are sort of saying, if you want to work with us, not only will your fee be X, but you will have E3 licenses, you will have anti-spam, anti-phish, you will have backup, you will have EDR as a minimum standard, and we will then work with you. That's the model that seems to be working really well. So MSPs setting a threshold for a minimum standard of security. I think that's a very good model.
And then from a channel perspective, then, because you're as you just said, you're basically channel only, so 3,000 odd partners. Is one thing sort of just signing a master agreement with a partnership. How do you, from a commercial perspective, turn that into a strong partnership and actually get that working well? Because I think we've seen lots of them before where they kind of sign up, there's a lot of excitement, enthusiasm, and then it goes by the wayside. How do you drive that sort of partnership agreement?
Yeah, well, I think for us, it's the type of MSP that we like to focus on. So the MSPs that we focus on, they are the trusted advisors for security. So they are setting that sort of minimum benchmark. So when they come to work with us, they've either already got customers or they've certainly got needs. So it's never a sort of a start at zero and sort of build into it. There is always a minimum that they're bringing to us to start with. We, at Cyber Sentriq, it's quite a simple proposition to the MSPs. When you need us, we'll pick up the phone. When you need our software, particularly the backup and recovery software, to work, it will work, and it will sort of get you out of jail, because recoveries are really, really stressful. And we will give you fair pricing that we can make margin off to continue to develop the product, and you can make margin off because you will be able to sell it to your customers because it does a good job for them. I think in any channel business, those are still the foundations of a relationship. If you don't have those in play, I don't think you can build a properly successful channel organization.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Well, one of the other things I wanted to talk about today, because obviously, a lot around AI, but you've got a lot of experience actually adopting AI internally, right, to actually make the organization more efficient, more effective, perhaps. So how have you gone about that? Because that's not easy, and it is a constant struggle, something I'm struggling with at the moment. So how have you actually adopted AI within the organisation?
So for experience, read battle scars for sure, and I think that's a good thing. Even if I think back, funnily enough, the first thing I wrote personally on ChatGPT was my sort of welcome to the company email when I first took over the role of CEO of Redstor, and that was about 3 years ago. So, going back that far and seeing where we are now, and where we are now is across the business, particularly in R&D, is we've got engineers writing code, testing code. We've got sales teams using Gong. We've got lots and lots of AI tooling that's sort of naturally appeared in the business. And then we have got AI tools that we've chosen to use as a company. And one thing that's been really interesting is, as our house, I guess, standard tooling has moved from being ChatGPT to Copilot to Claude over the space of a year.
Wow, that's a lot of change.
It's a lot of change. And the reason it's gone that route is because it's been driven by people who are becoming the faster learners in our business. And we operate a relatively open and democratic approach to it. So the favored approach for me is we created an AI acceleration board whose default mode is to say yes to tooling. And we encourage people closest to the problems to bring the tools. We have some very simple rules around, if you wouldn't put it on email, don't put it into public AI. Make sure you're always using it on private mode and use your company email address so we can sort of see what's going on. Beyond that, experiment, please, and then bring that to the show and tell. Show the business what you're doing. The AI board is all about then working out how we can deploy that at scale within the organization. And then they effectively make a business case for investment in that tool. And I think the really interesting part of it is when we started on the journey, it was all about efficiency. And I'm not sure I buy into that anymore. It seems to be where the benefits are productivity rather than efficiency. And what I mean by that is we're not taking large chunks of people out of jobs. What we are seeing is people doing 3 to 5 times in engineering, coding 3 to 5 times faster. And therefore the pipeline of work that they have is getting bigger and bigger because there is more stuff to do.
And that's just it, isn't it? Because people are frightened that it's going to take our jobs. Like everyone's talking about it. It is scaremongering. But your generally belief is actually it's just giving you more and the ability to do more, and then it's creating more work.
Absolutely. I mean, there is so much to do. Mm-hmm. There is so much to do, and I think when it's giving the, particularly in engineering, seeing those sort of really front-end developers, it's allowing them to get through things faster. But there's always more to do. There's always more code to write. There's always somewhere to take your product. There are always more features. It's never ending in software. It always has been. So this isn't saying, right, once you've reached the end of that code mountain, we don't need you anymore. This is all about how fast can you go? How much more competitive can you make the product? Can you deliver the roadmap 6 months faster? Can you prove that if we had 10 more developers all using coding tools, we need 10 more developers because we can be more competitive? That for me is what it's about. Now I'm sure there's companies out there, and I'm certain of it, that take a completely different approach, and that's each to their own. As I said earlier, I don't think anybody's really got the answer. But what I do know is a sort of a mid-size, $60 million vendor serving MSPs, that is an ultra competitive market. And what you really need is great people that know the market being really, really productive. And for me, using AI tools enables that, rather than saying we can do it with half the people, because we can. It's very simple.
And obviously, so you're a culture that embraces AI, and you're utilising it. Has that always been the case? Because it's, like I said, in my business at the moment, I've got the arguments of the pros and the against. So, and actually, is there an argument that you could have half the business using it and the other half not, or actually should everybody embracing it?
Yeah, and I'm certain if you grab some people from the organisation and ask them the question, they say, "Oh no, we're not." So what I believe in is you have to have a single doctrine that sort of comes from the exec team, not just from the CEO. It has to come from the team, and that is ours. That we invite people to embrace it. I am absolutely certain there are people that aren't. 100%. I'm absolutely certain that the people that said they wouldn't, tried it, thought it was the best thing ever. Everything's a surprise, actually, to me. There's some of the people that I've felt maybe the really early and aggressive adopters have actually been not. Some of the people perhaps you felt, okay, they've been quite vocally against it. You show them, particularly Claude or Claude Cowork or something along those lines, and suddenly it's the best thing since sliced bread. So I do think there's a difference between what our doctrine is and what the actual adoption really is in the organisation.
And I think that you can't force people at the end of the day. So it is, and obviously those that you probably suspected wouldn't use it probably are, as you say. I mean, with with that, and obviously with your policy around adopting AI and actually bringing it to the business, and because obviously these guys are almost your guinea pigs, and they sort of come in and they trial it and they said we should be using this. How do you actually create some of those controls? I know you've got a committee, but allowing everyone to sort of go in and start using AI. Some of your cleverest engineers are not completely, unsusceptible to being hacked yourselves, for example. So what do you do to actually put those protections in place just to be that extra bit careful?
Yeah, so as you'd expect, depending on what part of the organisation you're in and what systems you have access to, etc., we have a multi-layered policies. For example, you cannot put source code into these sort of public agents, so that that's physically restricted, regardless of anybody thought it was a good idea to do or not. So we have multiple layers there, but I think the biggest piece is encouraging people to try and fail. And we've had some really interesting screw-ups where people have experimented, and had they been able to do that in a live system, it would have been a problem for us. But because we had some good guardrails in place and we'd encouraged them, actually now the organisation's learned. So I think part of it's also about when those issues happen is not treating them like a failure, actually, and shining as much light on them, sharing the incident reports and the learnings as much as sharing the successes.
Yeah,
that's been something we have learned. But I think running a company today, a software company, there's a really interesting balancing act, because if I go to these shows, almost every vendor I've seen at the recent shows is sort of saying they can do things they can't. And there's a real push sometimes or gravity for you to get involved in all of that. And for me, that's probably the number one navigational challenge now, is how do you position a cybersecurity business in an AI-first world? When all around you, people are saying they can do things they can't. That's a really interesting challenge that we talk about pretty regularly.
And so obviously you talk about that a lot. And what tends to be the major sort of talking points then, and certainly the position that you guys come from?
Well, the big major talking points is for us, there are vendors out there positioning that they've effectively got a magic wand that can solve all the ills of the world. And now I think we're pretty lucky. We market into a segment in MSPs that are, technical businesses, and they absolutely understand that, people aren't out there selling magic wands. But we saw this. I mean, you may recall back in sort of 2007, all the hosting companies, everybody, even telcos, suddenly were cloud companies, and then the whole concept of private cloud, which effectively tenant somebody's data center, became a thing, and we're seeing this again, particularly now with the AI world. And one of the biggest challenges for me is just restraining us from getting involved with some of that nonsense, because there's a lot of it out there.
Yep, there's definitely a lot of hype bravado for sure. Just going back to obviously some of the internal toolings and implementing AI in the business, when we talked previously, is the amount of opportunities it created. And obviously when we talk about AI and we talk about a lot of the negative publicity around AI, it is about us not having jobs, and it really affecting the economy and all these different things. It's in the news. In fact, it was in the news this week. But you've actually felt differently. So you guys were going through internal changes at one point, and when embracing AI, you've actually felt that it actually creates jobs.
Yeah, 100%. It definitely creates jobs, and it creates opportunities. So, we have a role, a fairly new role in the organisation, a very senior VP level role, where that person's, it's a newly created role. That person's responsible for experimentation and governance and really forging a path that can be rolled out across R&D. So it's a brand new role. That committee that I sort of talked about is an opportunity for people who wouldn't really get the chance to sit on a board like that has a high degree of autonomy to roll out and deploy company capital on these initiatives. So there are people on that board, if you like, that we treat it as a development opportunity. I'm certain there will be new finance roles just to keep pace with the credits. So for me, if I look at the shape of the business now, and the business is smaller than it was this time last year from a headcount perspective, but none of that's to do with AI.
And I think that's really important, isn't it? The fact that it is creating new roles, it's creating new sets of skills. I mean, and governance being an extremely important point here, and actually that protects your businesses by actually, so they're very valuable, but also drives them forward. But as you mentioned, it affects other areas of the business. So it's not just engineering, is it? It's finance. All sorts of areas of the departments are going to be embracing AI, not just R&D.
Absolutely. And actually, it's been great to see the R&D guys really sort of push forward on the use of it. But the real benefit comes, I think, across the rest of the organisation. When, I'm sure you've got them, budget spreadsheets. Who really wants to go through the annual budgeting cycle with 20 different versions on Excel? Well, I don't. I'm sure some of the finance people that listen to this will love that, and they'll never give it up. But you don't have to. And I think things like what if modeling, what if discussion, for example, even at that level, very, very helpful. I wish more people would adopt that, for example. So in sales, Gong is fantastic as a tool, and this is a bit of a sort of a shout out to our investors, Brigal Milestone, actually, because I'd never heard of Gong until Brigal do a great job of bringing their CEOs and CTOs together, and I went to one of the sort of CEO gatherings they did last September, and one of the other guys sort of had this Gong thing on his phone, and he was showing me all this wonderful stuff he could do, all this sales intelligence he could pull, and it was like stepping into a new world. So we've got Gong.
What does Gong actually do?
So Gong plugs into your CRM, so in our case Salesforce. It can do real-time analysis of things like your rep call. It can do it can spot gaps in your forecast. The reps think you're going to close X, it's actually not going to close. So it gives you a different picture based on data on what your best reps are doing, your deal propensity, all sorts. And I'm sure we're only scratching the surface on it. But just that little step, for me, felt like a massive game changer. And we're just using a tool that's readily available. And I actually think Gong's probably 10 years old as a company. Yeah. So that's not even pushing the envelope, and for me, that really, sitting in a room with other CEOs, for me, was a big catalyst where people were picking use cases and they were finding tools to solve a problem, and it wasn't just your typical, we're doing stuff in R&D. It was a real, sales forecasts don't appear to be as accurate as they could. Right, use Gong. So just sitting in a room of other professionals with the same challenges and seeing people doing it, for me, is absolutely how this should happen as a sort of a community, is networking with other people who have the same role and same issues as you, and just seeing what's out there and giving it a go.
That's got to be very valuable, because I think being a CEO can be quite a lonely place at times, right? And obviously we can learn from people beneath us and peers and what have you, but being able to speak to people with the same challenges, albeit in a different organisation, that are embracing technology in this case, that's obviously proving to be invaluable.
Absolutely. It's for me, I think it's one of the best ways to drive this forward is sharing. Mm-hmm. As a group, and I encourage people to get involved with community groups, get involved with technology forums, and internally, as I said, we sort of do the show and tell, because I think it's so important. This thing is moving so unbelievably fast. You can be out of date in a week.
That is true, and actually that leads to my next question. Obviously, within the cyber world, it's changing all the time. You already talked about the pace, quite a bit. over the next sort of 12 months, I mean, where do you see the market going? Is there any particular sort of trends in innovation and big sort of focuses?
Yeah, I mean, one of the huge trends I'm seeing, and it's not something Cyber Sentriq offers as a company, but the rise of sort of data leak protection, DLP, for AI agents, so observability. Particularly at the RSA show in San Francisco, there were a lot of companies that were helping solve the challenge of what are your employees putting into all of these models, and I think that's going to be a huge growth area. And then I think the sort of classic model of red team, blue team. I saw some fantastic businesses where they were able to simulate an attack of your entire business in a completely different way to how you would normally do it. So normally, you take down the network. Maybe these guys were using agents to effectively, it was so interesting. They were attacking your network. They were attacking every single part of your infrastructure. They were taking out your website, social media channels, and even your phone switchboard as a simulation, but they were doing it with agents, just completely swamping you. So I think those two areas, for me, those are going to be huge growth areas in the cyberspace, without question. I've also seen some quite interesting developments around agents on networks. So people are deploying agents into their networks now. Great, that's fantastic. But who's keeping track of what they're doing, what access they've got, how to roll them back? So I think that that's another growth area. And then I think on the backup side, really interesting. So let's be clear, there are people out there that are replacing people with agents. Right?
Yep.
Just because I say that's not what we believe in, people are doing it. So if you replace people that run a business process with agents, well, what happens when those agents break? These are customer-facing processes, and the people that helped you run them and build them, they're no longer part of your organization. So I think where perhaps the backup world will go is towards restoring business processes that are based on agents, because you can't just restore an agent if the whole process is broken. So I do think that will be a really important rising trend over the next sort of year and 24 months.
I think that's the thing, is that obviously a lot of people, when talking about security, it's about really protecting your data and stopping attacks. But large language models, and agents are really changing the landscape now. So, and I think, there's very few companies in the scheme of things that are truly embracing them and true adoption just yet. There's lots. I'm talking to one company this morning that are building loads of agents that they're taking to market, but they're still learning what the challenges are. And security, we think high level, we know what the security challenges are, but actually there's a lot more to it.
We haven't even started. One thing that really struck me at RSA, I attended a talk, and something as simple as having an agent in your mailbox. So, I'm the CEO, so if I have an agent in my mailbox, by default, I'm effectively giving it the same privileges as me. And, he was talking about a world where what happens if, before you've even realised that the email's been read and responded to, somebody's just emailed your agent and said, can you send me last quarter's financials? Mm-hmm. And there's nothing you can do to stop that. Just little things like that. I don't think we've even scratched the surface of people giving agents permissions to do the same thing as them.
Yeah.
There are many, many lessons to be learned. I am certain of it, and people are going to learn them the hard way.
I think that's just the reality, isn't it? But as you say, if you put the governance in place, you put the protection in place, hopefully the hard way is less hard as it could be.
We will see. We will see. But I mean, we're still living in a world where people say backup. Well, backup, which is half of the Cyber Sentriq business and was all of the Redstor business. We protected 65 billion files, and they're doing hundreds of thousands of recoveries. Now, those hundreds of thousands of recoveries every single year, 50-50 split, half of them, they're people recovering from ransomware. The other half, still people deleting stuff. Humans deleting things, or breaking things. So yes, AI is now another threat vector, but those two still exist. Humans breaking things. Humans with AI are going to break things. They're going to break more things, and they're going to break them faster and probably more destructively. Bad guys with AI are going to do more bad things, and they're going to do them faster, more aggressively. That's the world we're living in, and the software's got to keep pace, but the processes, the expertise, that's all got to keep pace. But the humans are still a really important part here.
Yep. I think that's it, isn't it? Because, some argue about these models and the difference between right and wrong and all these different things. And whilst actually largely they can differentiate, it needs to have that human at the end. And I think, within the world of security, but within the world of AI, it's about working with AI at the end of the day. It's not replacing, not doing it against you. It is about working with AI. Simple as that.
Simple as that. For me, it's a new, very, very powerful technology that we're still just scratching the surface on how to harness as humans. And no doubt it will take us really, really far. It will create some very interesting businesses. It will create some really interesting possibilities, and it will change the next decade. Like there's absolutely no doubt about that. It will be exponentially different to what's gone before. But I've always felt this about working in technology. 30 years now. People say they come to technology because they like fast-paced, they like change, they like innovation. But I actually find in this sector it is still a lot of people that don't. And they are adverse to change. And I just don't think this is the era to be in technology if you're not prepared to embrace change really aggressively now.
I think it's moving faster than ever. I think they talk about the sort of the most recent sort of industrial revolution. Obviously the internet was probably the biggest innovation. Now it's AI, and the amount of money being spent, whether it be security, whether it be the infrastructure for AI, whether it be the power needed, whether it's data centers, which are now cool again.
Yeah.
We've been around long enough to see them where they weren't, and everyone was getting rid of them. It's completely changing. And if you can't get used to that change, then you're just going to probably fall behind the wayside.
Yeah, fall behind, but also I think miss out. When I look back on sort of my career, and I think about, the internet wave, that was really exciting. The dot-com wave, that was a new way of doing business. E-commerce, that was the big term of the day. Really exciting. Really exciting. Look at the things you can do now that are really born out of e-commerce. You can click a button and some guy delivers a curry to your house. Brilliant. That's progression. And then, the cloud wave, as you say, it was all about data centers for hosting companies, that sort of thing. And then cloud changed everything, and the things you can do in the cloud, phenomenal. And here we go again. And I think of the fun I had, the people I met, the great things I got to do. Well, I think I'm really lucky to have another go at that now. Nobody really gets sort of 3 or 4 big waves in their careers, but we as technologists are living in that era, and I think it's really exciting. Who knows what comes next? You've got the quantum wave, you've got all of that, but all I know is this is a really, really exciting time. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are frightened by what's ahead, that are dealing with massive challenges. But I think more than ever now, what we've got as humans is just more tools available to solve those challenges. And I think if we approach AI like that and be open-minded to it as a tool to assist us with challenges, to change our playbooks, because we've all got our playbooks, I think it'd be a really interesting and fun ride over the next few years.
Well, you sort of indirectly answered my closing question, really. So I tend to like to ask experienced CEOs and founders, really what advice you'd give to other sort of CEOs and founders alike, really in terms of who are navigating the challenges of business. Yeah. And obviously you talk about being able to adapt to change and what have you. But for those that may be listening that are maybe earlier on in their journey of a business, or they've just taken over a business, what sort of advice would you give to someone?
Well, that's interesting. now I've officially got the title of board advisor, I guess I'm now able to give advice.
That's your job.
Yeah. What would I say? Talk to people. You know, I didn't feel that I could come to my own doctrine, if you like, on this alone. And the real, and it wasn't a light switch. It's been a process of talking and understanding lots and lots of different perspectives before I settled on something I was happy to stand behind authentically and say, okay, live or die by it, but that's going to be my view and that's going to be my approach. And I'm prepared that might be a completely different view in 6 months' time. So no hill to die on. So I would say, advice-wise, speak to as many people in the same situation as you are. Go into it with the mind, and I'll say it again, there aren't any experts, they don't exist. There are people that are further up the learning curve, but they are still learning. Approach it with an open mind, be excited by the possibilities, understand governance, learn as much as you can, and have some fun.
Well, I think that's a good place to end it on. So I think that's it. James, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Nick.
It's certainly exciting to see what the future holds for you. So, but yeah, we'll have to get you back when you're on taking your next project.
Absolutely. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
And that's it for this week's episode of Humans in AI. A huge thanks to my guests for sharing their insights, and to you for tuning in. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to hit follow, share it with someone in your network, and let me know what you think. There's plenty more coming this season as we dive deeper into the people, the companies, and the ideas shaping AI right now. See you next time.